I've said it before and I'll say it again. Hospitality is not dead. The way we train hospitality is dead, right? Hospitality is not dying. The way we train hospitality is dying. And that's a big issue in the industry. That's where we come across all these problems with restaurants and restaurant owners. So we worked with over 300 restaurants worldwide. I've talked to probably about 1,000 restaurant owners. And so I have a lot of data on what's working, what's not. And I'm not talking about mom and pop shops, right? We've worked with, 50 unit restaurant companies. We've worked with multi-concept hospitality groups. We've worked across state lines. We have restaurant brands that are, in different states, different countries. And so we've seen it all, right? And one thing that kind of shocked us as we've kind of grown into this and been introduced to more concepts and newer concepts, different concepts, more elevated concepts, more successful concepts or groups is that they all have the same problems, right? All are the same problems. There's this core problems of hospitality. Can't get my staff to deliver hospitality at a high level. Can't get everyone bought in. Can't get everyone aligned. Can't get everyone trained. My managers are struggling to be leaders. And just consistency with hospitality and guest experience, right? Everyone's transactional, and that's across the board. Doesn't matter. We worked with restaurants that the servers are making $700, $1,000 a night. They're still transactional in some way, shape, or form, or it's all about them, right? It's all about them, not the guest or about the business. It's about them, right? More importantly, how come my section is this? How come I'm making this money? Why am I not on this party, et cetera, et cetera? So it's all the same across the board. And one thing we train on and we teach, and I always want to freaking emphasize this, and I get this through, like, you want to change your mindset, right? We want to be innovators. And I'll give you an example. Cheesecake Factory, right? Started in a little basement, sorry. Started in a basement. This mom got a recipe and out of a magazine for a cheesecake, and she made it. Everyone loved it, so she started making more of them. Her friends and family loved it, so she started selling them out of her basement, and she made some good money. And she did this for a very long time. I'm talking like over a decade. And then she decided to move out to California because they're in Detroit, and then they opened up the first Cheesecake Factory, and they sold cheesecakes. And then the son said, hey, why don't we open up a restaurant? Why don't we open up a full-blown restaurant? And everyone's like, okay, well, what do you want to call it? And he's like, well, we have success with the Cheesecake Factory. Everyone knows the name. Why don't we just call it the Cheesecake Factory? And everyone's like, you can't open a restaurant called the Cheesecake Factory. That makes no sense. But he was an innovator. He thought outside the box. He didn't have these blinders on, right? He could have listened. He goes, oh, you're right. That doesn't make sense. Let's call it something cool, right? Let's go up with this. No, let's call it the Cheesecake Factory. I like it. I want to stick with it. I think that being its name makes it unique in its own way and will have its own appeal because of that. So he opened it, right? Line out the door. They're busy right off the bat, super busy and super successful. And, a year goes by and he could have sat on his laurels and said, look at this successful restaurant I've opened. I love it. I can't wait to open more restaurants and just sat on his success. But instead he wanted more. He truly was an innovator. So he was looking out the window and he saw other people going to other restaurants during a lunchtime, and he goes, how come those people aren't coming to the Cheesecake Factory? How come they're choosing to go there instead? I want all the business, right? And so he said, you know what it is? That's an Asian restaurant and we don't have Asian food, right? That's an Indian restaurant, we don't have Indian food. That's a Mexican restaurant, we have Mexican food. So he started putting things on his menu that were top sellers of Asian food, of Mexican food, and everyone told him not to do it. Can't do it, that's crazy, won't work. And he says, why not? And so now they have 150 menu items, right? Which is absolutely insane. But that's part of their charm, part of their allure, and part of their success. And my point of telling you that story is that we want to be innovators, right? We want to be ahead of the curve. If you're doing everything like everyone else, you're going to get their results. And that's one thing I don't understand, right? I tell a business owner that, I tell a restaurant owner that, and they agree right away. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Yes, I agree. Yes, I know that. But they're still doing everything the same way everyone else is doing it, including training, including hospitality, right? If you're training the same way you are 5 years ago, does that make sense? Does it make sense to be training people that were before COVID, after COVID? Every time I talk to a restaurant owner, it's the same thing, right? Things were a certain way before COVID, now things are a certain way after COVID, right? We had some really good training going on, really good systems, really good things, and then COVID happened. Now it's like all a big mess. We're still recovering, but it doesn't seem to still be sticking the way it was. Well, that's because things have changed dramatically, right? We have Gen Z popping in and they're all over the workforce. And then we have post-COVID mindsets. So even if you do get millennials or boomers into your workforce, they have a post-COVID mindset. It's completely different. The way they operate, working from home, all this stuff that was created because of COVID changed the way people think and operate. And so that's why it's so important to understand that we can't train them the same way we trained them 5 years ago, right? If you bring in a trainer, a corporate trainer, a world-class trainer, and he was an expert 5 years ago, he's not going to be an expert today, right? There's no evolution. And on top of that, even the training we were doing post-COVID or pre-COVID, those were 10, 20, 30-year tactics, and they still weren't that effective. So we evolved the training, and what you want to think about is instead of trying to train outward, right? I say it's like an iceberg, right? An iceberg has this little piece on top, and then underneath the water, there's this huge, huge piece, right? It's exponentially bigger on the bottom. People try and train hospitality in that little iceberg on the top, right? They think if they just tell them, say this, not that, say these words, do this thing instead of that thing, right? Here's what hospitality is. Treat them like they're your friends. Treat them like your loved ones. It's experience. It's color, not black and white, right? All these little things that go over everyone's head, and we know it because we try and tell it to our staff all the time, and they still don't get it. They're still transactional. We have to, instead of trying to train here, which is outward training, right? I'm going to tell you things and expect you to do those things or see those things. What I want to do is train the inside. I want to train your mindset, right? I want to rewire your mindset. That's what I'm focused on. So what we do, I've done this before, where you walk into a room, and they're like, oh, can you train them hospitality? They already know hospitality. Well, I have a couple people in there, they're new, a food runner, busser, maybe a host, they're new, they're young, 17, they're new to the industry. Yeah, but they know what hospitality is. Oh, but they don't know at a high level. They know it at a high level. They do. They've done it before. They've done it in their lives. They've delivered hospitality, and they've done it for the reasons why we deliver hospitality, same exact reasons. And they're like, what? The restaurant owners are like, don't believe me, right? So I go in, we do a couple of workshops with them, and it's, I give you examples, but it's really dependent on the area that we're in. We have to understand our audience, right? So when you're training people, training your staff, you have to understand who they are, how they operate, and stuff like that. But once we do a little research, we go in there, we do a couple of workshops with them, super simple, a couple of questions, boom. They're talking about hospitality like they're an expert. Owner's sitting there shocked. And it's like, because everyone innately is hospitable. We know what it is, but first of all, we gotta do two things, right? That's what I talk about all the time. Instead of saying, hospitality, say these words, right? Hospitality, yes, you can overlayer those things, but first things first, we have to truly get them to understand what hospitality is in their mind. So we call it connecting the dots. It's part of the rewiring process. We have to connect the dots in their mind so they go, oh, I've done that before. I know exactly what that is. Versus, I want you to start doing these things. And they're like, okay, all right. So now they have more buy-in because they've done that. Oh, yeah, I've done that. Oh, no, I know. Yeah, you're right. Obviously not in a restaurant setting, but yes, I've done exactly what you're saying. Oh, that makes sense to me now. Oh, got it. Okay, cool. Versus hospitality is color. Hospitality is the way you make them feel. Yes, all that stuff's true, but again, it doesn't register. Then after that, after we get them to connect the dots, we have to get them motivated, okay? So I use this story all the time. I went to a restaurant group in New York, and we went to secret shop all of the restaurants. They had 10 different concepts. And the director of operations told all the GMs, do not tell your staff that the 30% rule is coming. We want this to be an honest review. We want to get a good temperament of where you guys are at so the secret shops are actually valid. Well, 1 out of those 10 restaurants did tell their staff. The GM told everyone, hey, look out for this guy. He'll be wearing glasses. They showed pictures of me, and they're like, if he comes in, make sure he gets the best experience possible because he's rating us. He's shopping us. So I walked in. Everybody was amazing. It was like this beer garden, too. And everybody was amazing, as if we're in a fine dining restaurant, right? They're all over us. They're greeting us. They're so nice, making conversation, telling us about the dishes, talking passionately, triple checking in on us. And it was amazing. Right? But I was talking to the person I was with, and I said, we clearly knew that they knew, right? Because they weren't acting that way with other tables. And I told the person I was with, I go, what's crazy is if this was the experience, if this is what they delivered with every table, this place would be packed. If this is what they really did, I would be in love with this place. If I had stumbled across this place, came in and got this experience, it would be amazing. But it's not the experience, right? They're putting on a show for us. But what did that show us? What did that tell us? What's the moral of that story? Is that it's doable, right? You can do it. They could do it. They were totally capable of it. I didn't train them. I didn't come in and say, hey guys, here's what you're gonna say, here's what you're gonna do, here's how you're gonna act. They already knew how to do it at a high level. So why aren't they doing it at every table? Because they're not motivated. But the big problem is that thinking inside the box, thinking like everyone else, the restaurant thinks it's their job to motivate the staff, right? Somehow they have to keep the staff motivated, which is completely wrong. Now, you do have to do things to, and I call it adrenaline shots, right? Adrenaline shots of motivation. You have to do things like make sure you take care of them, make sure they feel heard and understood, make sure they're supported, make sure that they have everything they need to succeed, make sure they have the right training, make sure they have good leadership. All those little things will keep them motivated in small ways, but ultimate motivation has to be self-motivation, right? They have to be self-motivated ultimately, and we have to, again, rewire their mind to get them to be self-motivated. And what we do, how we do that is we connect their why with our why. So first things first, we have to know their why. And secondly, we have to connect their why with our why, which you can do that with anything. I don't care if you want to go be a rocket scientist and you're a busser right now. I will show you how to connect their why with our why, right? Because I promise you they align. There's ways they align. And that's what we do. But again, when you're training hospitality, this is so important. This old school way of training it, right? Oh, it was 7 days and they follow and they do this. Sure, that's important. But another way to look at it too is that there's 3 layers, right? First of all, there's the tactical layer, which is basically like transactional. I'm going to show you, you have to greet the table within a minute, right? You have to drop drinks within 5 minutes. When you bring out a hot tea, you have to bring it out in this presentation. That's tactical, right? And then you have excellence, and the excellence layer is everything, the way we do everything is non-negotiable, right? So if we bring out a sugar caddy with that hot tea presentation, it has to be wiped down. We're double checking to make sure it's wiped down. We're making sure that has 6 of each one every single time, no matter what. That's the excellence level. We always do that with everything that we do, every piece, every way. And then the third one is the hospitality level. How do we elevate it, right? And that's where everyone gets around. Oh, okay, well, when you bring it out, say this, or when they order something, say that, and do this and do that. Sure, we can kind of like touch on that, and we can give them like tips and stuff like that, but that's not what's going to bring you success, right? Having someone walk in the door and say, oh, I'm going to teach your staff what to say, not going to bring you success. What's going to bring you success is rewiring their mindset to understand what hospitality is from their perspective, connecting the dots, having them become self-motivated through connecting their why, understanding their why, connecting their why with our why.